The Enterprise has arrived at the Prospero system for a rendezvous with the Kelsey May. Captain Pike made jambalaya with Delton Parsley, and Lieutenant Ortegas can sense it when someone is pretending. Should I hope not? Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc frickin' Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk. Today, we're doing a review of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Under the Cloak of War, written by our good pal, Davey Perez, directed by Mr. Jeff W. Byrd. We've got a special guest today. Who'd have guessed it? It's Mr. Jeff W. Byrd. Thank you so much for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you guys for having me. Thank you. I love this show. So I feel honored that you guys.
We love your show, and you're doing a lot of shows.
Yes.
Very quickly, this entire season of reviews was sponsored by our good friend Anna Post. Thank you very much, Anna, and congratulations on the new cadet. Let's just get into it. Cirroc, this felt like a different type of Star Trek episode, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, different type. I mean, they've all been different types. Each episode felt like, feels like an independent type of standalone almost movie. And I think when we talked with David Liu, he mentioned that he has that free reign to kind of make a movie out of this stuff. And that's really what I wanted to ask you, Jeff. First of all, compliments to you on this episode. I loved every moment of it. I felt like the timing of it was great. I was eating up every scene, every close up with Mbenga and with Chapel. I felt like there was so much energy in the room when you were filming these scenes, and I just want to get into how you kind of started off with this journey in diving into this episode.
I got to give it to Davey Perez, who's a writer and also an EP on the show. And, script-wise, first and foremost, they asked me to the party. I met Chris Fisher when I was directing. Chris Fisher, who is the producing director of the show. I met him when I was directing an episode of Star Trek Discovery. And we were on the volume together. I went down to look at them shoot the volume and, just so I can get a sense of what it is before I directed my episode of Discovery where I was going to shoot on the volume. And I met Chris Fisher, and he was just like, what are you doing? You doing Discovery? Well, you got to come over and do Strange New Worlds too. I got to get you over there. And then, and him and the other PD from Discovery, who you guys probably will know, Olatunde Sunsami.
Sure.
So yes, Olatunde was there, and he was like, stop poaching my directors. So it was a whole funny moment between the two of them. And it's so funny. I was hesitating to bring up Tunde's name. So I was like, oh, can I talk Discovery on the Stranger Worlds episode, on the Stranger Worlds podcast? But it did spawn from there. So that's kind of how it happened. And Chris Fisher and I got along really well. And then, he put me on the director's list and, got it approved by the higher ups, Akiva Goldsman and everybody. And then I met Davey, whose script was bananas. It spoke my language, still speaks my language to this day. And he was, very open to, hearing what my vision, was for the episode. And it really sunk up together with Davey's vision for when he initially wrote it. And, and hey, I'm, just so you know, starting off, I stand in solidarity with the writers and the actors out there. DGA, yes, we did come up with a deal with an AMPTP, but I do stand in solidarity with the Writers Guild of America, and with the Screen Actors Guild of America. And I wish Davey could be here to talk about this with us, but he's out pounding the pavement, seeking a fair deal, which they all should be doing. So I just want to get that out of the way and say it.
Huge shout out to Davey Perez. Not just a great guy, but he can write the out of an episode. My God, what a beautifully written episode. But you, Jeff, you've done a ton of awesome television projects, especially recently. Star Trek Discovery, you mentioned. Yellow Jackets before that, which is a great one. I think that's the third episode of the second season. But amazing stuff. The Discovery
and I'm also
episode.
The co-executive. I'm the co-executive producer of Yellow Jackets. So I'm the Chris Fisher and Olatunde on Yellow Jackets.
Oh wow, that's great. Did not know that.
Yes.
Yeah, the Discovery episode you did. I remember Cirroc. We were on the cruise last year when it premiered, and the crews actually the Star Trek crews put it on the big screen for all of us to watch when it premiered. And it was just so big and so epic. And the boat was rocking. I'm like, what's going on with my head? Because you set up these kinds of scenes and these kind of planets and these locations with incredible uniforms, first of all, yes. Beautiful like scenery and lighting. And you just set up these things where it feels like you're being taken away. Like you're just kind of almost like in a dream state. And I kind of want to know what's the motivation? What's the inspiration behind that? Are you just trying to make us completely forget that we're watching something on a screen?
Yes, actually, my thing is I'm 100% agreeing with you. I do like to make people feel like they're immersed in the world. Immersion is something I really, I'm really fond of, and it's what brings me back to my childhood. How Steven Spielberg would immerse you in the world of Jaws and things like that, and like even with Jurassic Park. So what I love about and even from the OG Star Trek episodes, you would immerse yourself into those worlds, and obviously back then they couldn't be as wide and expansive as we can now with technology, unless they went to a location. But now with this technology, you can really, like you said, Ryan, just really immerse people in the world and with really wide scope building shots. And then that way, when you come in through all the drama and all the emotional work that these actors do amazingly, that's another thing really that I think that really is a shame. I mean, the work that these actors do, the scripts that are provided are amazing, and then the way the actors bring it to life. And it's a shame they just don't have a pure Emmys for just that, for like sci-fi Emmys. That's what they should have that. Because so much hard work goes into what they do and what we do as directors coming on the set and what the crew does. But these actors really, when you see some of these scenes, I have literally watched, Discovery and Strange New Worlds and cried, literally standing up crying about someone. When Hemmer died, I was no good for like an hour. I was literally no good for like an hour to anyone. And it was real tears of emotion. So I think people in the sci-fi world don't get enough credit for how they move, the fans. And I say all that to say, yes, I like to immerse people in to answer your question, Ryan. Yes, I like to make sure it's back to scopy so I can immerse. And you guys do me a favor. Always feel free to get me back on path because I am a talker.
This is
we're immersed in your answer.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to bring it to a different subject, kind of, I see you've got the Star Trek Rasta colors mixed in with the headgear. Yes. I love it. You've got the black alert on the shirt representing Discovery. Yes. And really, what I thought you did well in representing, since we're talking about these black themed representations. Yes. My early time in the business, I remember having difficulty finding people who were good with black hair, for example. They just, you couldn't find a black person who was in the hair department. And they didn't really know how to deal with black hair that well. And we've seen a lot of progress made in that arena in the business, I would say. Yes. And also with makeup, there was a difficulty with matching tone on black skin. And I would always point out bad makeup jobs because you could see the contrast in the skin tone and color. And what I think you did a great job in this episode was telling these close-ups and these intimate moments with black features. And I really felt that intimacy with Mbenga, the patience, the softness of the lens on his face, the lighting, of course, his performance as well. But the time to take the moment out to get those shots right, I felt showed me an advancement in that arena as well, in the directing arena, where, now we know how to film black people better. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're catching their facial expressions. We're playing with the subtleties. And I wanted to talk to you about how you brought some of those things to the table, either in instruction with performer or with just moving the camera around.
I'm glad you bring up that question, Cirroc. And it's interesting, Ryan. So going from Discovery, which was scopy and big, wide, and then Cirroc hit up on in this episode. I really tried to keep it towards close-ups and really get into the heads of what PTSD is, and how that affects someone in the future on a starship, and then a black man, who's at that point far removed from slavery and Jim Crow, and and right now what we're going through with affirmative action being struck down, all that stuff. This is way in the future, but you also still you have this black man who's struggling through PTSD, and then say what you may. The beauty of Star Trek is you can go, oh, is it Klingon black or is it Klingon? It's so funny how we always search that. It's like, okay, so is this alien, even though the alien is green, is this alien black or is this alien white?
Yeah, exactly.
No, the alien is clearly green. Well, but really, so there's that whole scenario. So, in my episode, obviously, the Klingon that comes on the ship is black, and when talking about hair, I don't have the dreadlock hat on for nothing. I have dreadlocks. So having when we were talking about the hair for him, it was really about, okay, so Jeff, what do you think about this dreadlock wig? They gave me like a whole bunch of dreadlock wigs, and because we want the hair to be more like yours, so let's get it correct so it looks as real as it can look. And we'll compare it, to your hair every day. We'll bring in one, we take a look at it, and we'll take a look at it against your dreadlocks, and we'll say, I'm like, okay, cool. And that's kind of like what we did. And the beauty of it is they were so open, to the collaboration of it all. And Bob Wisdom, who was a guest star, and wanted to make
awesome job by him. Awesome job by him.
Amazing. Bob Wisdom's amazing. Another one who's out there pounding the pavement, picking it. But he would love to be here too. But he was amazing. And then we wanted to make sure we matched the skin tone. So Cirroc, I'm so glad you hit upon that and you saw that. We really worked hard to do that. And, on top of it, the thing is, which what some of y'all may miss sometimes because it's always hidden in the behind the scenes of it all, is the stunt scene. So when they have the fight scene, they had to have a stunt man who, and a lot of times back in the old days, there weren't enough black stunt people. So they would do what is called a paint down. So they would take brown paint or whatever is a black person, they'd paint the white person brown and just have that person go do the stunts and then swap them in and out. But now we don't have to do that anymore because there are enough. And I remember we had to find the right stunt guy for Mr. Wisdom and, make sure the skin tones were correct and everything else. So, I'm so glad that you hit upon a lot of that, Cirroc, in your question, because those folks work hard over there. Those folks over Stranger
That's the
Worlds.
progress. That's the progress. I saw the grays in the dreadlocks. I was looking at all the, I looked at the gray hairs. I was looking for every detail. The makeup was great on his face. He looked natural. And Mbenga, you couldn't even tell if Mbenga is wearing makeup. He just looked.
Yeah, exactly. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. Babs has great skin, but you can really, but they do some makeup on him, but you can really tell they're so good at it now. And folks are paying attention to it now. And because they know, look at that. We're having a conversation about it because you brought it up. And that shows people that it means something. Back in the days, 15, 20 years ago, they were like, oh, no, just it's no big deal, right?
It's brown. No, it's brown. Exactly. It ain't my brown.
Boom. But they're realizing that now. And then Chris Fisher, being the PD there, he's very sensitive to that stuff. So he always makes sure, and he's like, hey, did we get this right? Did we get it right? Hey, Jeff, was that the right way to do that thing? Because we can reschedule it and shoot it again if you don't feel it was. So they were all always great about that. So I love that. I'm so glad you noticed.
Jeff.
Oh, I loved it.
You kind of mentioned something in there too that I hadn't thought about when you mentioned the Klingons and black and white. I just realized that I feel like Klingons may have been the first Star Trek alien that was portrayed by black people or white people, where they just said it's a Klingon. Who gives a anybody can play it's an alien. He's got stuff on his head. Who cares? Anybody open it up. Anybody can do it. So shout out to the Klingons out there.
Yes, shout out to the Klingons.
But Jeff, I wanted to ask you as well. When you saw this script, phenomenally written by Mr. Davy Perez, was there a particular moment or scene or aspect of the script that you just thought, oh man, I can't wait to shoot this?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, goodness, there's so many. David and I were talking about that on set. It's so funny. We walk on set, and the episode was amazing. So, but every day I would say to Davey, "Oh, you know what? This is my favorite. The scene we're shooting today is my favorite scene. This one right here is my favorite scene." And then he was like, "Oh, the first time I did it, he was like, oh, that's great, man. I love that. Oh, you're right. This is a really good scene." And then like a day will go by, another day. Oh, you know, Davey, this is my favorite scene today. This one right here. So almost every other day there was a scene that was my favorite scene. So Ryan, it's funny you asked me that question. One of the main themes, I guess. Let me get overall first before I do a macro before I do a micro. The overall theme to me in this episode about, and you know, I guess without giving spoilers, or are we giving spoilers? Are we spoilering or are we not spoilering?
Well, they can see
at this
it by
point.
now. It's really
yes. People watch this
okay, so
after they've seen the episode.
I'll be light spoiler, so just in case for folks that didn't see it yet. I love the fact that Davey in the script played with, you know, whether, you know, he wanted to do it or whether it was self-defense or whether, you know, all the different versions of, you know, how this death happened. And, you know, and was Mbenga being 100% responsible for that death, and how it played into, you know, the full arc of the episode. So that to me really grabbed me, because there were, you know, unbeknownst to all you folks now that you've seen it on the air, there were 3-4 different endings to the actual episode. There were literally. I did not envy the EPs on this, because I gave them basically 3 or 4 different versions of the ending that they could choose from in regards to however they wanted to play it, whether we wanted to go straight hardcore and Mbenga killed him, you know, or, you know.
I was going to ask you, is part of one of those endings actually showing the murder, or the you know, the last killing, as opposed to behind the glass, the frosted glass, we couldn't see it?
Yes, there is a version that I did shoot where we actually shot the fight and the knife going into him, the whole thing. So there's a whole version like that. Maybe they'll release one day. Maybe they'll do it on a special box set or something. But there is a version of that. And I remember when we were shooting it. So this was never anything like, well, Jeff, we're going to secretly do it, cut it this way, and not tell you what we're doing. You know, they were very upfront. I love the EPs on that show. They're very upfront. Jeff, you know, we think we want you to shoot, you know, like 3 versions of it. And I was like, okay, cool, I'll do that. And I'll even give you a 4th version, because I got another idea in my head. And it's like, okay, great, do that too. So we spent like a nice, you know, few hours shooting these different versions. And then luckily the actors were with it. So they were 100% into it as well. And we did like all the versions. And yeah, so right, you hit the nail on the head. We definitely had a version where you literally see the stabbing. Chapel comes in, witnesses stabbing, and then Chapel also becomes like a, you know, an accomplice to it, because she knows he killed him, and she's like, okay, so what are we gonna say? How are we gonna spend this after we leave this room? How are we gonna spend this? So, which was a very interesting scene between the two of them. It was a very interesting scene between Mbenga and Chapel in regards to, you know,
I have to say, I like the cut that came out, because I like the mystery behind us not exactly seeing that conversation. It gave me a little bit. It just lets me know that she's a rider, and she doesn't need too much instructions on, you know.
Yes.
You know what the deal is, right? I also really love the line, which was just played so well by Babs, when he says to Captain Pike about, you know, making the final judgment call on what he did, and Mbenga responds. He says, "You have the privilege." And then there was a pause.
Yeah, I know. He hit privilege that extra little bit. I even wanted to rehear that.
You beat me, because I was doing the macro, and the micro was that. So the micro, my favorite scene, to answer Ryan's question, was in that moment, because I remember on set we had a big, you know, powwow about it, you know, about the particular word choice in that ending, and we had a powwow about it. You know, myself and Davey and the actors. And, you know, and we realized we had to say that, you know, Mbenga had to say that. And it touches ground here in the current world that we live in, which in if you think about it in terms of the future, in terms of Star Trek world, he might be thinking privilege in terms of, his rank or, a bunch of things. But
it could be anything, but I know what it is.
But we know what in this era that we're living in, we know what Mbenga meant. But,
he paused on that word. He let that word hang too. He let it hang out there. And then he followed up to see the best in people. But it really was a great moment. Loved the moments. I mean, just so many little. Jess Bush was phenomenal as well. She has the way to communicate so much in the eyes like he does.
Yes.
What a story to watch.
Davey he wrote his tail off in this episode. He wrote his tail off in this episode. And there are some aspects of the episode of the script that are not in the show because they were just so hard hitting, so heavy hitting. It's kind of like, oh well, we gonna really shoot this scene right here? Are we gonna shoot this scene away? And I was like, please, can I shoot it, please, Davey? You got one of the early drafts, Jeff. I had to take that out. That got taken out. And I was like,
I felt the Sisko presence in this episode with the jambalaya, the rock to Gino.
Oh yeah.
I felt like we had a looming little Sisko.
And it was a little reminiscent
essence.
of Nor the Battle to the Strong, which was a Jake Sisko episode when he
and we talked
visited.
About that on set.
Yeah, it definitely hit those notes immediately. I got that. That's really cool that you guys actually discussed that.
We talked about that on set. It was just Wow. Look at the both of y'all hitting on that.
Yeah.
I mean, the notes were there.
That's some true fanship right there. You guys remembered that episode and saw portions of that in this episode.
Absolutely. Remembers it well.
Yeah, I remember it absolutely. But actually, there was so many times I wrote down lines, and to me, that's a big sign of just when the writing is that good. Also performance, but just the writing is so good that I'm just writing down line after line. I wanted to ask you though, because the fight scene was really big in this episode. And Babs obviously has that judo experience.
Yeah.
And so was he the person that you got to be a double? Did they have to have that experience? Did he also lead the judo instruction? And was he basically the choreographer, or was he just kind of, showing us what he could do?
Sorry, I'm sorry. You guys have probably heard this before. Then, huh? This is not the first time you guys are hearing about the Babs scenario.
Yeah.
So listen, Babs is let me tell you something. Anybody
crazy
in the world, if Babs is walking through an alley and if any one or two or three people decide this is the guy to rob, I feel so terribly for them.
Yeah, they better have their affairs in order.
I feel so terribly for them because Babs is a walking weapon and literally. And when you're around him, you can feel it, even though he doesn't lead with it. He tries to, lead with I'm just a regular person, but you can feel it. And if you touch him on the shoulder or any body part, just like sometimes I come over to give him direction, I put my hand on his shoulder. So Babs, and you can literally feel it. He doesn't flinch, he doesn't move or anything like that, but you can literally feel the muscles, the tendons, the fact that he could snap at any moment in time and break your arm if needed. So anyway, I say all that to say you're on the right track. So he definitely, the beauty of Babs is we have a stunt coordinator. So I'm no disrespect to the stunt coordinator on the show, was amazing. But in those one-on-one scenes, and even though Babs is working with a stunt person, but Bob did some of that stuff himself too. So Bob would want Babs to show him stuff, and Bob would be like, oh, maybe do this arm thing, and I'll put you this way, and then I'll cut there, and then we'll put it in the stunt double. And so Babs and I would have this conversation. So Babs would help because of the fact that Babs knows that he can hurt somebody, even in play mode. Mm-hmm. So it helps if he's, choreographing that when it's hands-on. And he'll look over to the stunt coordinator like, okay, and then he'll do the things. And it definitely helped the stunt man who was in the scene with Babs, and it made it look even more realistic because he knew exactly what Babs was going to do. And also he gave him his body over to certain things that Babs was going to do. And also he knew what he could do to Babs. So therefore Mbenga, Babs like, oh, you can really hit me here. You can really do that to me here. You can really throw me over there like that. You can really get on top of me here. So it was great in that regard. So And Babs knew just how much. He's like, the guy was holding back up, and I was like, you don't have to. You're not going to hit me. He's like, no, I didn't want to hit you by accident. He's like, you're not going to hit me by accident. It will not hit me. It will not. I will see it because his reflexes are that quick. So even if you think you're moving fast, he's looking at you, and he can put his hand up to stop it, even if it got this close. Boop, got you right here. And I've seen it happen. Like I said, I've seen him do it. I've seen him do it, and I was like, oh my God. And all the little stuff, something falling off a table. Oh, that's going to. That's
awesome.
Yeah, I got a chance to meet him on Star Trek Day not too long ago. And, I walked up to him and I just made a beeline to him like, my name is Cirroc. I love your work. And he kind of gave me that look where, the look he gave me is the look of a fighter is what I'm trying to say. It's like it's a sizing up type thing. And I realized at that moment, I was like, okay, I'm going to take you off the list of people whose ass I might be able to kick. I'm going to take you off that list, bro. I get it.
Yeah. And he will do that. You hit the nail on the head. He will do that. He will size up a person. And it's just I think it's just his nature.
It's just nature. Yeah. It's training, years of training. Yeah.
That's just what it is. But yeah, so to answer your question, Cirroc, he definitely helped with the choreography so that it could be as good as it was. And Mr. Wisdom is, a bigger gentleman and, a little older in that regard too, obviously like in the show, like in the script says and everything. So Babs was also able to help him with a certain, level of the mobility, that he had to do the things that he needed to do. Babs would help him find ways to do it easier. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're using too much energy for this. Let me, this is a better way. You can conserve energy here by doing it this way, doing this move that in that way. So Babs was very instrumental in that.
I'd also like to compliment Mr. Wisdom on the performance that he gave because I enjoy the way his inner villain was suppressed by this peaceful overtone that he had, and I thought he did a great job of navigating that balance to give the audience the impression that he is a reformed person. So I thought those were he just nailed it as far as the tone of that character.
He did, and that's the funny thing. So you hit on another good point. The funny thing is, when do you forgive people? When do people change? Can they change? If they do change, do we let them change? Or do we constantly, and that's part of what, the episode was about. That was part of what, Davey was trying to communicate, in the script is, when do we know if a person has actually changed or not? And how do we forgive that person? Even after years and years and years of being a scoundrel, a villain, a murderer, a killer, a bad person, how does that work itself out? It was just such a complicated set of conversations that we have.
But I also felt like that was a two-way street that Davey was telling us. He was like saying, yeah, he may have changed, but what happened also changed in Benga.
Benga, right. Yes.
So he was like, yeah, I've changed too, though.
Yep.
Exactly. And just to add one more thing to that, that was also reminiscent of another episode to me personally, Duet from Deep Space Nine. Some of those conversations in there, I immediately went from Nor the Battle to the Strong and was like, wait a minute, this is also tonally similar to Duet. Really beautifully written, beautifully directed. It hit all the right notes.
You can't get nothing over on you, Ryan.
We do like our Star Trek. Yeah.
No, we loved it. I mean, it just hit on all the notes. Also, like the guest star who played the doctor that was kind of introducing Chapel to the tent city area.
Yes,
he reminded me of
Clint
Aaron
Howard.
Eisenberg a lot.
Clint Howard. That's Clint
Howard. And Cirroc, we'll talk about him in the next segment. But he is Star Trek royalty, which I'm sure, Jeff, you heard a million times on the set all about this guy. But
he is Tranya. You kidding? Come on.
Yep, that's the one. But Jeff, we want to thank you so much for joining in the fun today and telling us your stories. I know, that's how we feel.
You guys are amazing. You guys are
10, man. This show has more 10s than any one I've watched so far, besides my own.
Yeah, this is 10 City. They got 10 City, we got 10 City.
Another 10,
man,
Jeff, you deliver.
I love you guys. I love this show, and feel free to communicate with me at any point in time. This is amazing, and I love how you definitely give, sci-fi and Star Trek its flowers while it's happening. So thank you both for having this. Thank you both for having me here, and thank you for having this world so that people can, enjoy it as much as obviously you both do.
Wow, that's so cool,
Loved
Jeff.
it.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, look, Jeff, again, thank you so much for hanging out with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. We do hope to see you again real soon. Continued success, co-executive producer of Yellow Jackets. Nobody forget that. That's a big one, too. Everybody, stick around. We will be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
Jeff W. Byrd has left the building, but the energy is still high here. So here are the trivioids of the week. The Enterprise has arrived at the Prospero system for a rendezvous with the Kelsey May. Lieutenant Ortegas thinks the ambassador is doing a long con to get Federation secrets. There's a reason the Butcher of Jagal got that name. The Butcher of Jagal burns his hand on a hot cup of Ractigino. Alvarado has internal bleeding. Captain Pike needs some Delton parsley, which is deadly in excessive amounts, but delicious in small amounts. Lieutenant Ortegas can sense it when someone is pretending. Captain Pike made jambalaya with Delton parsley, and Protocol 12 is discontinued. Cirroc, in the previous segment, you mentioned there was some Sisko in there with the jambalaya, and I got to admit, look, I'm vegetarian. I'm vegetarian AF. But when they said, for some reason, jambalaya with Delton parsley, I don't even know what Delton parsley, but I was like, that sounds yummy. I want some of that jambalaya with Delton parsley.
I instantly thought of a Sisko. I was like, wait a minute, I drink Ractigino. I love me some jambalaya. Wait a minute,
Ractigino.
This is my Ractigino. But yeah, man, there was just so many great moments in this episode. Babs is just like so winning me over with his acting. He's so subtle and not overacting when I see him do his performance. Always like it's just straight down. He's just like straight, to me, like a boxer who's like locked in and tuned in, like just focused in
the zone.
There's no extra movement. It's just straight. The scene, for example, with him and this ensign, where he saves that ensign, and then he sees the ensign about to go off and fight again, and that the ensign says something to the fact like, I got to do it. That's the mission, right? He's like, that's the mission, right? And Benga says, without even missing a beat, he looks at him. First, he doesn't want him to go. He's like, I'm going to call your superior officer or something to that effect. And but then after the kid says, that's the mission, isn't it? And Benga, without switching a beat, straight looking him in the eye in very short of a precise second, he says, stay low, fight hard.
Yep.
And I loved it. I loved it. It was just like, you're going to do what you're going to do, and let me give you some good advice.
Yeah, to me, Mbenga is kind of like, stay with me here. He's kind of like that girl that you broke up with, but then later on you come back to. And what I mean by that, you're looking at me like, this better make sense, because I have no idea where you're
because you better really draw this one back. You better circle back on this.
To me, in the first episode of Strange New Worlds, he was the guy that I was immediately like, this is my favorite character already. Immediately, first episode, second episode, third episode with his daughter, those scenes with his daughter, and I love his accent, and it adds some cultural depth, to a show. And he just, he's got a very kind face, but he also has like these kind of deep eyes. But then 15 more episodes happen, and then we focus on La'an, we focus on Una, and and so we kind of start going like, oh, that's a really good. Oh, that's really cool. And then every once in a while, now we need an episode like this to remind us, nah, Mbenga's the one that brought me to the dance. I gotta go home with him. But, it's kind of a nice reminder, that, what a great character, what a great actor he is, how well written he is, how well acted he is. Because they do focus on different characters a lot. And sometimes certain characters only get 2 or 3 lines in an episode. So it's great that we get these spotlight episodes that are constantly rotating. See, I brought it back, kind of, right?
Yeah, you brought it back. That was that was some saving grace. But no, he is an amazing actor. And it almost makes me say, was he always like, he went from the fighting world into acting, I guess, at some point. I don't know when his initiation or when he initially started to.
He probably walks into that room when he's auditioning with the utmost confidence, because fighters, especially world-class fighters, they have this confidence. It's a quiet confidence. It's not bravado, but it's probably a lot of it is that he just walks in, he nails his performance. He's not intimidated or worried, I'm assuming, but maybe that's got something to do with it.
And if you don't give him the job, he'll kick your ass. So you really have no choice. No, I want to say there was an actor named Harold Perrineau who was on The Wire, and he's a very successful actor, great actor. And he's made a very good career for himself in a lot of movies, and I'm sure he's starring on something right now. But no, he was on Oz. I'm sorry, not The Wire. He was on Oz.
Okay.
Yeah, Harold Perrineau. I did a movie with him, worked alongside him. But he has a very good, deep set of eyes, great facial expressions. And to Bab's credit, he actually reminds me a lot of the great actor that he is. So his performances were just, he's so good. When he had the cardiac arrest and he does the whole heart attack thing, it seems so believable to me. Yeah, that's Harold Perrineau.
Yeah, I've definitely seen him in something.
He's been in 1,000 things, but it originally was on Oz, if I'm not mistaken, back in the day when Oz was hit show for Showtime or what it was. And if I'm not mistaken, he played a character that was in a wheelchair on that show. But anyways, going back to Mbenga, like the looks that he gives are just so great. When they had that whole "we got this" moment with him in chapel, when she says "we got this," and then they flash back where he's saying it back to her. Great writing on Davy's part. I just love that whole, from one scene to another, where the origin of the "we got this." Also wanted to talk about the fact that Chris Fisher gave us a heads up when we interviewed him about this green vial and the backstory that would eventually come. And here
we got a little touch of it, right?
Yes.
Again, a little touch. And that's kind of what's cool about it, is they're not going to give us the answer. They're just going to tease it a little bit more. Like they basically said that was the thing that was, what was it called? Something 12. Protocol 12 is discontinued. And basically they explained what it was, which is, this constant rush of adrenaline and pain
inhibitors.
Exactly. So you don't feel pain, and you have this ultimate adrenaline. But my worry is that's got to have one hell of a come down, because when it goes away, you do end up feeling that pain. You feel those broken bones, you feel those bruises, and when you have adrenaline rushes afterwards, you're exhausted. You've worn out all this energy. So I can imagine, that definitely comes with some negatives to it. It gets you through the problem, but then you need a nap and a doctor.
Yeah. But they gave us the backstory. And that's what I really love about Mbenga, is the way he's able to make these tough decisions and just like move forward ahead. Like, there was that moment where Chapel was like, "Hey, if we reroute the power and this and that," and he's like, and then she's like, "Well, we'll lose this guy," and he just like, "We save lives." Yeah. there's a finality to the way he says things. When he told the guy to leave, he says, "Just get out of here." I felt the moment. I felt like I was like, "Bro, you should leave." I think he want to leave the room. The way he said that, it's like he means that. Um, Even when he said that moment, he was like, when he's recalling killing all of Kif and all of the other Klingons that he had to kill to get to him, and he says to him, he says, "I looked for you, and now here you are." And it was just like the way he said it. I was like, "You're about to get killed." I was like, "You're about to get killed, man." I kept saying it over and over to myself. Like, I don't think this Klingon is going to make it out of this room.
It's funny that we keep referencing other shows, but that also had a slight darkness that was done also in Deep Space Nine with damn, I can't remember the episode, but it's basically one of the best episodes of Star Trek when with Senator Vreenak getting killed
in the pale
moonlight.
Right?
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's the one. Just that darkness of it, and that where it's like a little bit is left to interpretation, where we kind of just turn a blind eye to it and we just kind of say, well, hey, whatever, but it's dark. It's a dark Star Trek episode. Both of them are. And
this is a dark episode, but it was done like, the way it was told. It's almost like, there's things that are unforgivable, right? If Ra, Ambassador Ra, was the one that killed all of those people, right? His own crew, then we would have looked at it like, what a cold-blooded guy, right? But because it was Babs who did it, we're like, yeah,
yeah, kill those guys. You get them, boy. You're cool.
Yeah. So it really it walks the line of, what's right and wrong, of the kind of stolen valor that Nor the Battle to the Strong was talking about, with my character kind of getting elevated for something that they weren't really did, or not in the same frame of mind that it being celebrated for. So I think that was a lot of the backstory was just so intricate, so good. I love the Ortega's Uhura scene where she's kind of opening up to her about just the distrust for this character. I love the Spock scene where Spock is like, "Look, I just want to help," and he's like, "Oh, so I can help by not being around." Okay.
That was a nice scene. Yeah, that was cool, because he kind of first he says, no, it's fine, and then he just kind of leans in. He's like, okay, I don't remember exactly how he said it, but he did say something to the effect of, okay, yeah, I'm concerned because I can't help, which was a very nice little moment there of him admitting that. I didn't put it in my notes, but I can't find it at the moment. He says, no, okay, whatever, we'll have to move on. I had the quote, but it's something to that nature.
But and the other quote I liked was when Una kind of had the moment with Pike, and she walks into the office and she tells Pike, "Hey, look, we got to get rid of this guy. I found a faster way to get to where we got to go to, and let's go that way." And also because the crew morale is low. I just like the whole
interesting
that conversation. It was a good conversation for me.
And the quote that Spock said, I found it, is, "I'm having difficulty watching you experience such obvious distress. I'm having difficulty watching you experience such obvious distress." It's certainly a Spock line, because it doesn't flow off the tongue, but but when he says it, you're like, that is such a Spock thing to say. I also wanted to bring up our good buddy Clint Howard. So this was the 5th Star Trek episode he's done in 5 different Star Trek series. He was originally, Ron Howard's brother. He was originally the kid in the Enterprise, the Corbomite maneuver, I think. Yeah, I'm looking up. Yes.
On the original series, right?
Yeah, Baylock, and that's the guy that goes Tranya, and sometimes you'll see people cosplaying that. And he was also in The Next Generation, Past Tense Part 2. He was Grady. He was in the Enterprise episode Acquisition, played a character named Muck, and he was, quote, Creepy Orion in Star Trek Discovery, first season episode, Will You Take My Hand? And now this is the 5th one. So he's been in 5 Star Trek series as 5 different characters. So that's pretty cool. As soon as Star Trek fans see him popping up in a new series, we all make gleeful noises, but it was good to see him.
Ironically, I got a feeling of Aaron Eisenberg when I watched him in his performance. There was something about how he did it that reminded me of how Aaron acts. And I felt like he would have played some of those same notes the way he did. So it was, I don't know why, but Aaron just came over me when I watched him do this performance. So it was a special thing. And he stood out too, he's just so, he just stands out when he, like this little small guy, gray hair, balding, and you're just like, but he's so good and he just hits all these notes and he's just, he's like, yeah, that's the last guy you were asking about, that dead body of it.
Yeah, this show also touched on PTSD a lot. And, I'm fortunate to not have any kind of PTSD situations in my life. But as far as I know it, something like this, like having closure to, M'Benga and Chapel are getting a little bit of a sense of closure, but that's not to be conflated with PTSD ending. That kind of stuff, as far as I understand it, is never going to go away. They can mitigate it, they can treat it, but maybe in some cases that kind of closure would, close something and make it slightly go away. But I feel like, M'Benga and Christine Chapel, they're stuck with it forever. Whatever PTSD they got on that planet, they might feel a little better on the day-to-day with that kind of closure, but I feel like, what they went through is still going to stick with them. And it was interesting how seeing the guy, hearing his voice, triggered those images. And I'm sure a lot of people, I wonder if they're going to have a warning beforehand on this episode, but I'm sure a lot of people, when they saw those scenes, it reminded them of certain things. It brought them to certain things, whether it's cerebral or emotional. But I feel like some people are going to be affected by this episode. And I would love to hear in the comments below if you thought this was an accurate depiction. Obviously, they didn't go too deeply into it, but if you thought that this was well portrayed in that subject matter, because I'm kind of a novice there, so I can't really speak on it.
Yeah. I mean, from the people that I've had interaction with that have discussed their PTSD, it's triggered by traumatic events that you can't delete from your memory banks, right? And this goes really to show that throughout Star Trek, it has been really consistent about one thing, and that is mental health is something that is not curable in the future. They have dermal regenerators. They can fix your broken bones. They can even bring some people back to life, right?
Yeah, they can. If it's an important character. If it's somebody else, then they're like, oh, I don't know, he died, whatever, got to move on.
They can even save your life in the buffer, which they did in this episode and kind of did a callback on that, keeping his daughter in the buffer. So there's so many things they can do in Star Trek. But one thing they cannot do is cure mental illnesses or mental, have any kind of real sustainable treatment for mental health. It's something that people have to deal with their own ways and with their therapist. But it's something that's there's no cure for it. And I think that's one of the things that's been consistent about Star Trek. Everybody has had to deal with, past issues. We saw with Dax having to bring many lives into the equation, so having the emotions of multiple lives. And I think that's what makes Star Trek appealable for all of us, is because we are all resolving issues in our life, whether it's tragedy, whether it's loss of a job, whether it's change of an environment, whether it's a graduation and expectation into the workforce. There's so many different things that we all have to manage on a personal level in our lives, that yes, our mental state is never coming like this, just flowing through like a straight line. It's always going to be an up and down. But when you suffer from extreme tragic events that are, can leave these kinds of permanent stains on your memory bank, then yeah, you're going to find things like this that trigger. And I think they dealt with it in a healthy way. And I think Mbenga essentially defends his point of view with Pike when he's saying essentially, what does he say? I didn't start the fight, but I'm glad he died.
Yeah, I thought he was going to say, I didn't start the fight, but I did end it, because I was like, oh, that is such an 80s or 90s line. But he said even better, but I'm glad he died. Hey, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, so there it is.
Yeah,
I mean, that summed it up for me.
There was also a nice moment between Una and Pike, number one, and Captain Pike, when she says, we need to get Ra off the ship. Crew morale is low, as you mentioned earlier. Federation or not, everyone is on their own journey. And it was interesting that Pike looks at her. He says, okay, change course. And I do love it. Everybody loves to see when a captain trusts their first officer, when a captain makes their first officer feel empowered and listened to. There are times when a captain has to say, no, we're doing it my way. This is the plan. This is the whatever. But it does make us always feel good to see somebody come up with something that they think is really important to their superior, and their superior respects their opinion enough and their assessment enough to go against what they were planning in favor of that person, because that does make that person feel, empowered, and it's probably the right decision. So anyway, that was just a nice little moment that just makes us like both of them even more, at least for me personally.
Yeah, what they're doing with Pike in this series reminds me a lot of how they used Sisko on Deep Space Nine. It was a sparing use of the captain.
Yeah.
You don't see too much of it. The story doesn't centrally always revolve around him. It's not, actually very rarely revolves completely around him. It's always about these tangential things that he has to make judgment calls on, and he's aware of things, but he's not there always in the mix of it. And to me, that's the kind of way they use Sisko as well. They used the ensemble, and they didn't just say, okay, he's the lead, so all the stories are about him, and then everybody else gets the trickle down stories. It's an ensemble feel. You mentioned it in the beginning. We started with Mbenga, then it kind of drifted, and it went to Spock, and then we're covering all these characters and learning more. We still haven't gotten a full-out Ortega's deep dive. We've gotten a little bit of it, but not like full-out, deep dive episode. We just recently got a full-out Spock episode, where he was turned human, and it was a deep dive episode for him. So they're fleshing out this ensemble. I think they did a great job as far as casting with this guest star in this episode. Of course, the guest stars last episode were the Lower Decks. So they did, that was another great guest star.
Yeah.
So they're killing it when it comes to their casting, the pace of the show, and the writing is really second to none. It's on par with anything that Star Trek has ever produced, in my opinion. And this is as good as it gets when it comes to great writing. These stories are interesting. There's never really a dull moment when I'm watching this. I'm watching this episode. I'm like, when Mbenga says, I am the butcher of Jagal, I was like, oh,
nailed it. Yep, we get it. Like, suddenly it all hits. We're like, wait a second. He's the guy that did all the killing. He's the butcher. The other dude just capitalized on it in some sick and twisted way. Really cool.
Yeah.
Well, tell you what, that's about all the time we have, just a boot today. But before we go, Cirroc, did you enjoy this episode?
Absolutely enjoyed this episode. Like I said, from start to finish, was thoroughly entertained. What about you, Ryan?
You may be surprised to hear me say this, but yes, I also did enjoy this episode. No, it was a good time. It was a nice change of pace. I love that, the season itself is like a roller coaster ride. You get this kind of show. Sometimes it's a little dark. And so there are going to be some episodes that aren't for everybody. Not everybody's going to like an episode like this, where it's kind of gory, kind of dark. Some people may not like, ones where they're bringing in, comedic animated people. Some people may not like, so on and so forth. I'm not going to get into details there. But
everybody has their choice, but they're
right.
definitely keeping it consistent, and they're also giving us little nuggets that they keep filling in backstory on. So they advance the story, giving us a nugget here, and then advancing it forward when they revisit it. Mm-hmm. Like with this Protocol 12 green substance, like with the Gorn, I think was mentioned in this episode again. So I keep anticipating a big Gorn party to come soon in this episode, in this show at some point.
It's going to be called the Gorn Hub, okay. Where they all get together to hang out. Okay. Anyway, we'd like to give everybody a very special thanks to our friend Homer Frizzell, who we know is shaking his head right now, Dr. Marie Segal, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackmon-Tom, TJ Jackson-Bey out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arucan, Titus Mohler, Darlena Marie, Dr. Mohamed Noor, Tierney C. Dieckmann on a post, Anil O. Polat, Joe Balsarotti, Mike Gu, Dequeue, Neal Akasaka, our good pal Justine Norton-Kertson, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, my live from Tokyo, the Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manosfi, Marsha Classic Schreier, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason the Outrageous Okun. All right, that's about it for us, everybody. We will see you next time. And until then, always remember the 7th rule.